Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. It really means a lot, and it'd be very interesting to hear about what you have to say about Iran, which, as you know, is such an interesting country and is going through so much change at the moment.
You're welcome, Philip. Thank you for your interest and for inviting me for this interview. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So how long have you been ambassador to Iran?
I've been ambassador to Brazil to Iran for 3.5 years now.
And
yes, and it's been very, very, very interesting. Very good experience.
Yeah, and before that, were you also involved in foreign relations?
Yes, I'm a career diplomat for almost 30 years now. So I served, my first embassy was the Embassy of Brazil in Russia, in Moscow. Oh, wow. Then I moved to Washington, D.C., from Washington, D.C. To Buenos Aires in Argentina, then back to Brazil for 7 years. Then I went to London, the Embassy of Brazil in London, then back to Brazil again, where I was working as the head of trade promotion and investment promotion department at the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And finally, Tehran, 3.5 years ago, I moved to Tehran, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's incredible. And do you think that Iran and Brazil have become closer allies recently in the 21st century?
Well, our relations have been always based on very good understanding about or sharing common positions in the international scenario in multilateral agencies, for example. And even before the revolution, during the Shah's time, we had a friendship relation with Iran. But recently, we had a more, let's say, high-level visits from both sides. During President Lula's administration, government in Brazil, we started again or resume better commercial relation with Iran. And also there is this very controversial subject, which is their nuclear program. Yeah. And in Brazil we also have a nuclear program for peaceful use. Yeah. So we thought about in that time when Iran was dealing with the United States, European Union, there were a lot of sanctions against them, and there were some difficulties in negotiating the agreement. So Brazil offered to be a kind of honest broker, to help Iran in their negotiation with our Western allies, with the European Union and the United States. So we did this. We were successful at that time, but unfortunately, I believe it was not the right time for Europe and the United States. So it took some time after that. That was 2010, 2011. And then after this, in 2015, they signed finally the nuclear agreement with the European Union and the United States. And it lasted for a few years, as you know, when President Trump was elected in the United States. 1 year after his election, he left this Iran nuclear agreement, which in our view was really probably, in our view, not the best step, for many reasons. But anyway, this is the situation right now. And but coming back to your question, during this time, as I said, we tried to help. We have more contact, but especially also in the commercial and economic cooperation.
And Iran and Brazil's friendship, it's a lot based on trade, isn't it? Because they are the main trading. Brazil is Iran's main trading partner in Latin America, and I know that Iran's 17th largest trading partner is Brazil. So do you think this relationship is also a lot based on trade as well as foreign relations?
Absolutely, you are right. Yes, Brazil is the main supplier to Iran of some agricultural commodities like soya, corn, beef. So yeah, we have close commercial relation with them. sugar as well. So things that we can do right now because of the American sanctions. Now, you know, the only sectors that are not sanctioned by the U.S. Measures are agriculture, food stuff, and medical equipments, and everything that has to do with the health sector. Yeah. Because of no, of course, of humanity, let's say, in order to help the people here in the society. No, it's they could not sanction those sectors. No, the supply of the food security and also everything that has to do with the health sector. So that's where we focus our commercial relation with Iran, mainly in the agricultural commodities. So yes, they are very important for our exports, and we are trying to diversify, but it's because of the sanctions, it's very difficult. But in this area of agricultural products, we are doing very well with Iran. It's true.
Yeah. And what are the main sort of changes you've seen in Iran as a country since you began your time as ambassador?
Well, in the last 3.5 years, I can tell you that I've seen positive and negative, of course, changes. The positive ones, I would say that the people here are getting more used to, for example, to social media. The young people, they have more access. You know, Iranian government, they control a lot the media, you know, and it's been there since the revolution. But recently, they were more flexible with the social media, for example, Instagram or Twitter. Even Iranian officials like the president or the minister of foreign affairs, they have Instagram, they have Twitter, they send messages through this social media. So this is good because then people can have more access of information, you know, what's going on in other countries. So this was a positive thing. They've been more tolerant with this with the social media. And in the negative side, well, again, as I said, when Trump was elected, just after 1 year after his election, they reimposed economic sanctions against Iran. So this was very sad to see that the difficulties because of the sanctions, it really affects more the poor people, you know, the society in general, not the leaders of the government here. So that's why I don't believe in economic sanctions. You see what's going on in Cuba. The U.S. have imposed sanctions on Cuba for decades, and nothing has happened. You know, only the people get even worse. The situations get worse, and the regime, the political regime, has not changed. So that's what is going on in Iran. You know, that's why I said the negative impact of the sanctions is usually the people who suffer the most. So this is sad to see, you know.
Yeah. And you know, especially in Iran, after America reimposed sanctions, a lot of Iranians feel as though they're sort of being that the USA is sort of the aggressor in this. You think in the country worldwide, public opinion of USA has taken a huge downfall since the reimposition of sanctions?
Well, I would say there was a big disappointment. You know, they were expecting a lot from the nuclear agreement that I said that they signed in mid 2015. They signed this Iran nuclear deal, and then in the deal was started to be implemented on January 2016, and then for 2 years they were expecting the benefits out of it. Iran has fulfilled all his commitments to the agreement, and the International Atomic Energy Agency, they have done a lot of reports. They came here to do the supervision of the agreement and their Iranian commitments. And they, in all reports, more than 12 reports, they say that Iran was fulfilling all their commitments. But the United States and Europe, unfortunately, they were not fulfilling their part of the deal, which was open up the banking sector, the trade transactions, facilitating to Iran. And then when Trump reimposed the sanctions, of course, the situation got worse. And now the Iran nuclear deal, we don't know whether it's going to survive or not, which is a real pity for, I believe, to avoid nuclear proliferation and also for the situation of this country. So coming back to your question again, that it's, I wouldn't say that there is a anger feeling against the US, but for sure there is a disappointment for many people, because unemployment rate is increasing in Iran, especially for young people. So, they have very good universities here.
Yeah.
One thing that you can find in Iran, not only oil, gas, but also grains. They have very good universities, very well educated people. So this country has a lot of potential. They have a lot of potential. But that's why there was this big disappointment, when the U.S. reimposed the sanctions. So that's the situation right now.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the economic situation in Iran, is that one of the reasons why there's been much more protests and civil unrest in the country especially since the sanctions were reimposed last year?
Yes. And after maybe a few months after the sanctions were reimposed, we saw some protests here in Iran, in some cities, but it was not specifically against the government or against the regime. They were protesting about the economic situation. There were lack of products, for a while, especially in some regions. The inflation was going up, so it was not really against of course they were protesting against the government because they want the government to do something more to help their situation. But it was not really a political move, let's say, a protest. They were more socio-economic moved. The justification, let's say, the reasons why they were protesting was much more about their socio-economic life than the political thing. So recently we haven't seen many protests. Last year, yes, we had also some protests when there was some protests as well in other Arab countries. You've seen in Lebanon, in Iraq, and there were protests as well. So here also there was again in some cities, including the capital Tehran, we've seen some protests, but again, much more related to the socio-economic situation than the political situation.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you think that it's a lot of, as seen during the Arab Spring, a lot of the times in the Middle East, when a lot of countries and surrounding countries in the Middle East have civil unrest and protests, it tends to affect the rest of them a lot as well. And do you think that conflicts in Syria and Lebanon are affecting Iran a great deal as well?
Well, in a way, yes. And why I say this? Because, Iran, and it's very clear, Iran is helping some groups in Syria, in Lebanon. They are backed by Iran. The Shiites that are fighting in Syria, for example, Iran was invited by Syrian government to fight against terrorism. The Islamic State, other Al-Nusra, all those terrorist groups. So Iran was invited to help the Assad president, asked them to go there to help them. So they were there to fight against terrorism, and then they start supporting some local militias. They coordinate and they help those groups to fight against terrorism. After this, we're seeing in Syria, it's a civil war. There are groups, they are trying to be in power to get rid of the president and change the regime. And there are groups that are defending the regime, they are supporting the regime. And Iran is backing some of those groups supporting Assad's regime. So they're very much involved in the Syria conflict right now. So to be involved means to spend resources, financial resources, human resources, you know. So it means spending financial resources that sometimes they lack here in Iran. So people are seeing here in the society, they don't like that Iran is spending money abroad to help Syria or to help Lebanon in the same case. Yeah. You know, Iran supports Hezbollah group in Lebanon. So they also send financial resource to Lebanon. But of course, people here, when they see the economic situation, there is a economic downfall here, and they cannot find jobs. So they would like this money to be spent in Iran, not abroad. No, they don't understand why the Iranian government is spending this money to help Syria, to help Lebanon, if they are in this such a turmoil in the economic situation, socio-economic situation here. So in this way, yes, you're right, the situation on those countries also affect the situation in Iran, you know, and also the public opinion feel on what Iran is doing in Syria and Iraq as well, and Lebanon, you know. So they spend a lot of money helping groups in those countries.
And you, that's very interesting. You talked a lot about how a lot of these sort of proxy wars are fought on the basis of religion. And do you think that Iran is becoming more secular and more less religious as the time is moving on? And if so, do you think that's going to kind of affect the way Iran deals with other countries and wars in countries like Lebanon?
Yeah, I wouldn't say more secular, but they are very pragmatic. That's for sure. And Iran is a regional power. So they have interests in the region. So think that Iran is not going to fight for their interests in the region is very naive, you know. So when Arab countries, you know, they are Persians. They have the Persian culture. It's not exactly the Arabic culture. So there is a difference, first of all. And also being Shiites and not Sunnites in like in Saudi Arabia, there's another religious difference. But also they have strategic interests in the neighborhood, in the region, commercial, political, even, you know, for defense. Iran is surrounded by US bases, you know, in Saudi Arabia, and in Emirates, in Qatar. So there are many American bases, you know, and very well equipped, you know, also in Saudi Arabia, in Emirates, and Israel, of course. So they believe that if they have a presence in other countries, they can, let's say, it's a kind of trying to push their defense lines, and they don't bring any eventual war to their own territory. They want to do this, fight for this in other territories, you know. And so that's why, like a military strategy to push their defensive lines, you know, away from their borders. Yeah, it's one way of thinking, you know, of their defense. And like you said, fighting proxies wars, you know, because they know the difference, that they cannot fight directly against the Western countries for the influence in the region. But they have a lot of influence anyway, you know, commercial, religious, cultural religions in those countries. So that's what I said. You know, it's very naive to believe that Iran is going to give up having interest in those countries. They already had for you know, centuries. They are very traditional partners of Iran, like Iraq and Syria and other countries in the region. So the only solution I see is to recognize that Iran has legitimate regional interests, and trying to find a common way of non-aggression pacts, try to have a regional security system where Iran will be included, not excluded. Yeah. You have to bring them to the table of negotiation table, not exclude them. So far, all the measures by US and Saudi Arabia are to exclude Iran of the talks about the regional security. And I don't believe it's not pragmatic, it's not realistic. They should recognize that Iran is a regional power and they will always have some influence in the region.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I think that also now there's no debate as to the impact that coronavirus is having in Iran. 200,000 people infected, the closing of mosques and Friday night prayers. Do you think that with this huge impact that coronavirus is having, it's going to affect sort of not only the foreign relations, but the way the country is run internally?
I believe so, yes. Like any other country in the world, we're highly affected. This imposed to Iran a lot of costs, financial costs, because of course, the government that were the country facing the economic sanctions. Then remember, the oil prices went down in the beginning of this year, and oil is an important revenue to Iran and to the government. Most of the budget, the federal budget here, is based on the oil revenues. Even with the exporting less oil because of the sanctions, they still sell some oil, export some oil to Iraq or to Turkey or China. So they depend a lot on the oil revenues. So, and when the price of oil went down, so they suffer another impact on their economy. And now with COVID-19, with the virus, they have to spend a lot of money, like in any other country, to support the poor part of the population, So they're spending a lot of money, and of course also in the equipping a little bit better the hospitals, but also giving money, help, financial support to poor people. So they had to spend more money. So of course this has a tremendous economic impact, and also the economy again suffering. So this, I believe, yes, it will influence the way they will relate to other countries. I believe it will push them more to wanting a negotiation with America, with Europe, because the situation is getting worse here. To tell you the truth, the socio-economic situation. They will control the virus like in any other country. This soon, I hope, will be surpassed. They will find a vaccine, but the economic results, the economic consequence will be there for maybe another year or 2 years, a couple of years, because of the deficit, because they had to spend more and more. So that's why I believe the Iranian economy will still suffer more because of the virus and also the sanctions. So I believe all of this together will push them for negotiating a peaceful solution for the problems they have, basically with America, with the US.
And finally, do you think that Iran, because of coronavirus, because of their economic situation after the reimposition of sanctions by the US, do you think that this is going to push them to become more westernized, or do you think that Iran is already westernizing itself?
Well, the first time I came here was like 10 years ago. And my first trip to Iran, I came on a Brazilian delegation remember when I mentioned to you that we were trying to help the nuclear dossier, this nuclear negotiations. And then I came back the following year. Then I returned on 2015. So 3 or 4 times before moving to Iran as an ambassador, I was in the country. I had been here before. So, and I've seen since then, in this last 10 years, much more especially in the young people, this will to have a more open country to the Western world. No doubt about it, But, in Iran, in the regime, you have in the political sector of the country, you have all of them, they belong to the regime. They don't want to change it, but you have differences. The president today, we call it a moderate. He's from a moderate group. But also you have the hardliners from one side, and from the other side, you have the reformers. So the reformers and the moderates, they were the majority at Congress, but in the parliament. But in the last election to parliament, the hardliners, they won more seats than the moderates and the reformers. So this is not a good political trend, And from what we are talking here and seeing the international analysts, they say that next year there will be a presidential election, and probably a hardliner candidate will be elected, because one of the effects of the sanctions that the US reimposed to Iran was, as I said, they were very disappointed. The population a lot of people were disappointed. So the hardliners, they got more political power. They were accusing the reformers and the moderates who negotiate the nuclear deal with Europe and the United States. They said, you see, you shouldn't do this. You could not trust in the US. So they're now pointing their fingers to the moderates and to the reformers. And that's why they get more seats in the parliament. So the part of the population that are they were disappointed, they were voting more in the hardliners. So that's why, to answer your question, I'm not sure whether in the next years we are going to see open up of Iran to the globalized economy, or to a better relationship with the other countries. It all depends on the moves from the US and from Europe, what they really have to offer them. And because, as I said, there was a lot of disappointment with the nuclear negotiations. Yeah. So now to convince those people to come back to the negotiation table, they should offer, the economic benefits. They should finish with the economic sanctions and really offer them some benefits. And of course, they are worried about other issues like regional influence of Iran, the missile program that they developed here. So there are some issues that have to be negotiated. But if they don't see real economic benefits, I don't believe they will open to the world. On the contrary. But if they see real will, a political will, a goodwill from America and Europe to negotiate, then yes, we have a chance to see, let's say, a return to this trend of opening up the country to the Western world.
That's very interesting. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been so interesting.
Oh, thank you, Philip.
Hearing about everything that's going on in Iran and your position. So just thank you so much for the interview. And I hope maybe in the future we could organize another one of these things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the interview, for inviting me, and for your interest in my work here. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Bye.
Bye, Philip. Thank you. Bye-bye.